Sa sa ni ni da da pa pa ma ma ga ga re re sa 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 re re ga ga ma ma pa pa da da ni ni sa sa ni ni da da pa pa ma ma ga ga re re sa. Starting off with some vocal activation, you might call it vocal yoga, inspired by someone that was teaching me the Hindustani classical scale. Not a singer, not a yogi, and don't know the Hindustani classical scale. But I think the important thing is getting used to having intention coming from the body and really having a focal point of origination and authorship or engagement from a certain part of the body. You could relate it to the chakra system, different energy centers in the body, and the rest of the body becomes this open channel through which the reverberation can emanate, and also using the sound to shake free, loosen, integrate, or expel through expression any ridges or blocks in this full body artistry instrument that we are as human beings. So welcome. This is a brief embodiment and creative expression session requested from one of the students. So I thought I'd create a quick bespoke reply that I can share with the group. And what we're looking at is communicating from different parts of the body. For me, character can start from a lot of places. It can start from the body, from expression, from a certain way we hold, and all of a sudden, because we're holding our body in a certain way, because it's shifting our airwaves, the musculature or cavities around our voice, etc., there's a certain personality inferred. Could be back here, could be up here, could be down here. And for me, you could come from the body. You might come from emotion, you might come from a concept, you might come from a reaction to a context or situation. Loads of way to play with characters. But for people who are training in other forms of embodiment, perhaps dance, maybe massage, trauma release, any of these other kind of practices, this idea of expanding our canvas, opening up our color palette of expressions can be really valuable. So let's just start with breath. Breath, sound, and movement, these three components which work really well together. I'd probably also say intention is really key. When you start to work in martial arts or different practices, energy practices like Qigong and such, for me, it's about aligning those four. So having an intention, it could be in a particular motion, or it could be for the whole session. It could be some part of yourself you want to connect to or liberate or integrate. And then with this idea of the breath being somewhat an energy of spirit. In pranayama practices, they refer to literally the breath as spirit. Once again, I'm not a certified practitioner in that modality, but what I tend to do is, as I'm navigating and journeying life and coming into contact with all these different practices, I really start to have an affinity and a recognition of like, oh yeah, that's my experience in my body. Particularly when you start to do breath work, I think breath being such a pivotal and essential part of our livingness can really be attached to a sense of survival, being in our bodies at all, shifting from the almost trance-like, dreamlike state into a state of very much real, here, present in the moment. So as we're bringing that in, we're breathing, the intention is flowing, we're also bringing our energy and attention through the flow line of that breath to an area of our body. And even though anatomically, we breathe into our lungs, sure, there is a link to all parts of our body through our circulatory system. So that transitioning into the bloodstream, and then of course going to our veins and capillaries and through the arteries, etc., and reaching all parts of our body. It literally does reach all parts of our body, but even if just energetically, for the moment, we pretend we can breathe into our stomach, breathe into our liver, breathe in down into our bladder, breathe right to the peripheries like our feet and our hands. I really feel that is a good way to start getting energy flowing. You know, they often say in these practices, where our attention goes, energy flows, where the consciousness and witness of awareness brings our attention to a body part when coupled with breath and intention, and then amplified through movement, we start to get that aliveness and that chi. You know, in some mythological state of human beings, we might be able to shoot fire out through different parts of our bodies or ignite people. Maybe it's part of your massage practice or physical wellness, where you can actually imbue or transmit some of your chi and life energy into the other person. But one of the things that I muse about in our individual path in life, I do believe that the solo journey is so essential to come to terms with. And I liken it to that space between two palms. We've got a proximity. You could think of it like the synapse in between two nerves. There's a space across which the energy, the intention, the poetry, the dreaming, the love needs to leap. Now, if we are open and we have intention and unbridled certainty and we are generous with our energy, perhaps that fire of the heart does leap across. But I think what is also just maybe even more practical is for that person receiving your touch, receiving your energy, your poetry, your love, to take it in, understanding your intention and your gesture, your expression, and recreating it within themselves. So if you're doing this kind of work in partnership, it's as much about receiving as it is giving. And when we are training with people that we have confidence will be sincere and committed, earnest in their receipt of your creation, your energy, your life force, then we hope that the assimilation or approximation of what we're giving can be recreated in them. Often in artistry, I think this is what we're really doing. We're not playing our medium, like our paint or our music or our movement and choreography. We're playing the audience, the recipient of the art. Sometimes that recipient is us, if it's more for self-healing and that sort of thing, for the pure catharsis of the art process. But if we do want to gift our art to another person and inspire them, you know, like respiration, inspiration, to fill them with life, I think a key part of that is creating a context or a container where they are feeling safe to receive your energy. They are active and connected to their imagination, to their life source, to their field of potentials, which you might refer to as like the aesthetic realm, or this wavelength of energy slightly out the physical, but definitely plugging in and animating this physical world. So if your recipient, your training partner, is active in that way, when you gift them something, give, they can receive, be in play, animate themselves, recreate your creation, even if it actually never made it across that gap between the two. And I think this definitely relates to many other relationships. You could think of it like parent and child. You could definitely think of it, say, between two lovers. You regard them in a certain way. You appreciate, you adore, you have a subjective internal experience, and then want to convey that to nourish them, you know, not wanting to complete them, not wanting to, you know, exacerbate an attachment style of need and reliance on each other. But at the same time, of course, you want to gift them your life force and let them know how appreciated they are and how vividly you witness them in their existence. So as we're giving this across, I think having an understanding that even though you are there, it's up to their self-love to recreate, and knowing that there's a little bit of belief or trust needed that we can dance our heart out, we can express our poetry. Particularly artists, I think, lean into life and have such a huge spectrum of experience. We go down to the depths, we go into the heights, and that is one of the challenges of being an artist. I think one of the gifts is that we get to experience perhaps a lot more than many others. But I think our hearts need a little bit of faith and trust that your partner, whether that be a romantic partner or a training artistic partner, is going to be just as committed at recreating that as you are. And that for me heals my loneliness and feeling like in some ways this is always going to be a solo journey, because it's such a unique perspective and peephole that we have as a vantage point to life. Some people might say it's, the collective eye of the universal consciousness split into shards, and we are the universe experiencing itself. Perhaps I'm not going to ever try and say definitively, I think it would just be egoic to presume that I can categorize the unfathomable nature of reality, but I just have a subjective sense that whoever I am at source point, at authorship, in my human experience, I feel a little bit unique and a bit different. I feel to some degree misunderstood. I feel frustrated at not being able to express my horror and abhorrence at some of the cruelty human beings do to one another, and at the same time not being able to fully have my love and appreciation land when I have friends and loved ones who might feel unappreciated, not supported, unloved, etc. and so on. Okay, so that's just a key concept, highlighting the nature of the partnership of giving and receiving. So if you are creating spaces where your art, your expression, communication, love, etc. is being given, I would encourage you to also foster a capacity on the receipt side to recreate whatever you create. Now, when we are warming up this instrument of our bodies, we're going to focus on different energy centers. Let's focus on them chakra by chakra, being these energy points in the body, which are, of course, very popularized through yoga and this fascination we have with Eastern philosophy. For me, we start with breath, allowing our intention to come in, and imagining that our lungs extend to this particular part of the body. If, for example, we're going to start with our root, so let's participate in a practice together now. Our intention here is to really start to stoke the fire, a little bit like you would with fire breath. You're going to open your pelvis, your belly with the inhale. It's coming out. On the exhale, it's drawing in. In Qigong, they call it your lower dantian, this area a few inches down and in from your belly button. Imagining it like it's this fire furnace of energy or life force, the qi. You can also activate the root, so your sex organs, perineum, anus, this area in the base, in yoga they call it mula bandha or root block. Tensing and drawing up, a bit like you're preventing urine stream. And this, in my experience, also starts to activate the base of the spine. So in Chinese medicine, talking about the meridians or these energy channels in the body, feeling that activation of the line from our tailbone coming up our spine, up towards the crown of our head, over front of our face, and ending here at the top of the mouth. This is a very inspired, purposeful, connected space and energy for me. So sometimes when you're activating the root, you're squeezing, applying mula bandha, drawing the belly in, connecting with, I guess in this case, two energy centers, the root and also the sacral. You've got this base energy of the primal and the sexual life force, which literally, in the case of reproduction, creates more life. In the case of creativity, creates visions and futures from inspiration. And you can feel sometimes this tingle, this activation coming up through the central nervous system. For me, our spine and our brain are such interesting organisms. And I think of our organs as these separate, almost like different entities. I, once again, don't know the specifics, but I get an inkling of the different kinds of consciousnesses that are composite in the collective I. When I think of myself, I think, well, it's just me. I've got eyes and a heart and all these sort of things working, and I've got the sensation on my skin, I've got the imagination in my mind, I've got the memories in my heart, and I've got my emotions, and there's so many pieces and signals, taste, the weight in the room, the tension in my tendons. There's so many things bombarding us, and yet we assimilate them all and come to terms with this singular experience of I in a human body. However, when you do regressive therapy or internal inquiry, when you do body communication exercises, you start to get a sense of a sentience, and whether that's a full human consciousness, whether it's some kind of cellular memory, whether it's just energetic trapped emotion, who knows? These are semantics, these are specifics. The importance is that there is an aliveness in our organs, which I think is separate to just our consciousness. Maybe they're all mapped to a single consciousness, the control center, a switchboard of the brain connecting to the mind, etc. Regardless, they each have their own essence, they each have their own kind of, I would say even personality. So in this practice, when we start to connect with our organs, and this can relate to not just our body, but it can also relate to things like an organization as an organism, a culture and community as an organism. We want to flush in and connect and activate the unique components of the collective. And when each component separately feels expressed and integrated into the whole, we start to be able to leverage the full potential in that collective, or in this case, the collective of organs that we have. There becomes a fluidity in the body overall. So we'll go through the body bit by bit now, but the key idea is that we are isolating, or at least focusing on one part of the body, set of organs. Do this intuitively. I'm no textbook, I'm no sacred text. I am someone who is inquiring. And so with all of my practices, many of which, particularly the embodiment ones, are inspired from other yogic or martial arts practices, meditative practices, rewilding, etc. Start to listen to your body and understand that the technique, for me, should be subject to the intention. That's why I have this open form tattoo on my knuckles to remind me that the final form should serve the intention, not to be stuck on the technique. So you might find an inward breath with an outward belly is good. You might find an inward breath with an inward belly is good. You might find that going down to your root and feeling into the soles of your feet, activating your entire legs for this root is really good. You might find you need to have a certain sound coming out. Allow the body to respond to the underlying intention with all of these exercises, trusting that the superconscious, or the highly self-aware collective of this intention will be guiding you, as long as you release our fearful diligence to technique and trying to get it right. So a lot of philosophy and surrounding ideas packed around, but hopefully it's useful. Might want to go back and take some notes, or you might want to start from this moment now, when I clap, when we are just going to do more of the actual physicalized practice of talking from the body. A precursor to this, which I won't go into huge detail around now, and it's not even my own exercise, is the idea of talking to the body, being in communication with different organs. So you might also want to have this as a meditative practice, simply where you sit meditative, placing hands on the body, tracing lines down internally, and talking to your different organs and hearing what they have to say back. So that's kind of a nice general flow bringing communication exercise to make sure that your body feels really alive and connected. And then you might want to, after that, being as a primer, start to do some kind of this body expression. So once again, let's start here at the root. You might want to get into a physical position like a squat, You might want to take your hands and directly engage, feel connected to the body. You might want to bring movement to the hips. How can you start to feel like this area that you're going to breathe into and sound from has sensation, flow, awareness, circulation, all that kind of thing. So here, if I'm going to feel into the root, if I'm going to draw mula band or root lock, if I'm going to feel my lower dantian and belly button really active, for me, also because I'm starting to curl my tailbone in when I'm tensing that lower part of my body, it starts to feel a little bit like the earthy, a bit guttural, a bit growly. My jaw wants to start to come forward, and it's just feeling right now into what's coming through. Also, I'm currently squatting, so there's some tension, and I feel particularly in men, and our hips are a bit tight, but all bodies I feel can trap some tension in our hips. And so it makes sense to me that when we're doing energy healing, or when we're doing this catharsis, sometimes there is this lower density of pain, of guilt, of shame, of these kind of lower vibrations. Interestingly, mapped low to high, quite low in the body. And that tends to inform the character who wants to come from here. I'm looking at you talking from my lower end and I sound a bit Scottish. Tends to be like that, a bit grabby, quite intense. What are we doing here then? Here, going on? Also, there's a little bit of panic. If I'm feeling into my energy system, it's aggressive, but behind that is there's some panic, some fear, some agony. Some of this energy, which also makes sense if you feel into, for example, the bladder points, or into our kidneys, which would be correlating to the water element. That's where a lot of that anxiety lives as well. So I'm kind of like referencing quite academically and analytically the different correlations. You don't have to know any of this. Just feel, move and feel, and start talking and start feeling. If you're going to use some of the energy scaffolding techniques, so just briefly to go into that, the energy scaffolding technique is about looking at automatic energies and shapes, forms, structures that we are imbuing into the body. And by running them, by which I mean connecting and circulating them and expressing them, we're hopefully taking that automatic button press off, so we can then come to a more neutral default position. So if you can do some energy scaffolding, a super quick cycle through that would be to move in the body and feel any kind of shape that's stuck in the body. In this case, I'm feeling like a metal 90-degree angle here, a bit like one of those metal geometry rulers. And what I'm going to do, there's potentially lots of energy in the body, but I'm just going to focus in on one, and then I'm going to emphasize it by looping it. I'm also going to be breathing into the space. Sometimes we might exaggerate through almost like a pantomime approach to this kind of experience. Speed it up, etc. Until the point we feel like it is in motion. And once it's there, so we've got the shape of it, we're breathing, we've got the movement of it, then I want to go into the emotion. And that is going to start to have a concept, a loose concept usually, of some kind of communication in the body. In this case, I'm feeling an exasperated, almost panic urgency to straighten up and get my lines right. It's like I'm messing around. So sometimes it's enough just to be aware that that message is in the body as some kind of trapped intention. Sometimes you might want to say it out loud. Straight. Get right. Straight. You know, it can be very instinctual, subconscious, abstract. You're not there to continually police yourself. However, we often will, and I'll often say there are 2 workshops happening. One is the exercise or technique I'm inviting you into, and the other is your inner critic or police person that is, shaming you or saying, oh, this is weird, or, having an external commentary on what you're doing. So that's up to you to kind of loosen and give yourself the liberty, the privilege of just exploring your weirdness. Because weirdness for me is simply the unfamiliar and unusual. Doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's good either. It's just you can't quite map it. And it lives in a similar area to chaos. So for me, I don't know if there is such a thing as chaos. When looked at the pattern from a different perspective, something which through our little peephole might be confusion of lines and trajectories might actually loop around and fit in perfectly to balance something that we are not aware of. So I like to try and be humble and open up to the mystery and say, well, I don't know, I am having a heuristic approach to life, meaning I am learning through experience, through doing, and not trying to predetermine things, and therefore willing to navigate some pretty strange terrains. I think another reason that weirdness is so important is it's going to actually expand the fog of war. Fog of war in game design is this layer or ring of fog, clouds, that is blocking, making inaccessible certain areas of our map, our life map. And so we know what is within this area, and the weird stuff is actually going to allow you or guide you, almost like a supernatural aid in the hero's journey. It's this creature that's going to take you down the rabbit hole. It's going to take you into the dark forest. It's going to encourage you to go beyond your comfort zone and start to assimilate new experiences. So this singular quality of being able to sit without judgment in the weird is a huge part, I believe, of our learning. So yeah, welcome to be weird. So what is the difference if you're talking from your root? What comes up? What comes up? And then if you are to shift your breath, maybe your movement, you want to come up here more into the belly, intuitively massaging, rolling, maybe moving your hips in a different way. Yeah. If you refer to the sounding we're doing at the very beginning of this video, that ray, almost like scooping with a rolling R, the water into the womb space. Ray, ray, ray. For me, there's a lot of pathos, empathy, grief, yearning, calling, mourning. Hey. That might be just something that's in my body. It might be a characteristic of that particular energy vibration. Hey, hey, yeah. And aspiring to having the rest of the body just being this open channel. So if you're really engaged in one part, we want to then have an openness in another part. A really simple way that I like to experience and train this duality is simply by rubbing the hands. So if I rub my hands like that quite fast, I notice an anxiety or a tension start to come into my heart. It's like, oh, I can't keep this up for much longer. Sometimes almost a nausea feeling, being nauseous, starts to come up. And that's because I am having in animation, you'd have it like a secondary effect of the tension. So I'm rubbing here, and because my arms are engaged, I'm also tensing my heart and chest. This relates to times when you come up into a fight, flight, or freeze response. You're in some kind of urgent emergency or danger situation, and one part might need to be tense. Maybe you're holding on to the edge of a cliff or something, so your hands need to be tight, but you are subconsciously tightening every other part of your body, and you might start to get tired before you need to because of that secondary tension. So the way I practice this is rubbing my hands and practice softening my heart, breathing in a way that feels relaxed, while at the same time my hands are really still moving and having a lot of friction and tension here. And this helps have two different states in my one body. You could have a similar situation where we're having a confrontation with someone and you're starting to feel your gut get tense. Recently I've been in Bali riding a motorbike and feeling that sometimes if there was times I really needed to be lucid and clear, I didn't want tension on my body. I wanted to be supple, and so I'd be riding, and if I noticed that tension coming on my body, I'd really soften my belly and breathe calmly. So encouraging you to have the discernment when you're activating a certain part of your body. Is it taking over the rest, or can you have two different states? And with the singing or sounding expression, this really helps when your point of authorship is very alive, but the rest of the flow channel is quite open and soft. Coming up with our sounding into the ga, ga, you might want to activate this area with some rubbing. This is up into your fire meridian, activating this ga, ga, this warrior, your solar plexus, your burning fire coming up towards your heart. The power center. Hey, da, ga. What sort of starts to come from that state? And are you attached to an identity? Do you want to just be the nice version of yourself? Or can you feel a fire and not have so much self-consciousness you don't let yourself really go into it? Some people might say, oh, it feels egoic to do that, or, I'm just shy. That's possible. But when we can get to a point of reverence, where we respect life itself, we respect the potential songs coming through, we respect the potential important messages and conversations that we will have when we are this open port for expression. And I've witnessed this for example, in church services where people have such reverence for God or whoever they are praising. The sound of their voice and their expression doesn't matter. They put it to the side because what they're singing about is so much more important than how good they look or sound. So in this training, I'd really encourage you to bring that level of reverence to your training. It might not be important right in this moment. You might be at home in a bedroom or in your yoga studio. And what does it matter if you train all out or not? Potentially. But there is that old adage of how you do anything is how you do everything. And this is your time to train for real life experience. When we've had a lived experience of it, I think that in the moments of life when it actually happens, we've got somewhat muscle memory, we've got some kind of personal reference that goes beyond the strategy mind and into the lived experience and body. So I actually think it's really important that we train to full capacity so that we can live to full capacity. Coming up into the heart. Now, when we're breathing into the heart, it's very easy to get tension in the neck and jaw and go to that fight, flight, or freeze, sympathetic response in the body. But what I want to do instead is try to soften the vagus nerve at the back of the face, maybe some cold water, softening the jaw, opening the face. Sometimes I like to just get my hands and mush things or feel like clay, softening so that this identity, my mask, this bit of real estate, which is so much about my identity, can be cracked and become just a soft ground. And that way, even if I breathe up into my heart, I'm not going to have this additional tension. And we start to have this cyclic, connected breath experience that's like rebirthing breath work. Not having so much tension, but instead an activation and opening. You might want to open up your arms. It's also about the exhale and the softening and the complete release. You might want to do a 3-part breath where you start the breath lower in your body, down into your belly. Once you've filled that jar up, you continue in your chest. Once you've filled that up, you continue in between your shoulder blades, almost like your wings. So it's down, up and out, and back. And I immediately feel that governing meridian, my spine, the tingling, the activation of that it's quite inflammatory, that flame, that ignition, that tick, that spark, that lifefulness. You might even feel the pins and needles in your eyes, and you might start to shift the balance of your oxygen and the other parts of your lungs, carbon dioxide, all the other parts, nitrogen, etc., and feel a little bit faint. Please work within your own capacity and your body experience. We don't want to push it to that level. But I do think that it's a marriage of these things. It's not just about hyperventilation. I really believe there is also an aspect of the body opening and releasing different energies. There is an aspect of the kundalini awakening, the life force redistributing. There is an aspect of our aliveness, our attention to the present moment, so our presence, and also the purpose that comes through a revitalized body in action in the world that also lights us up. And you might also get this experience of the room lightening, or just things feeling less dense, etc. In our vocalization before, this is the ma. 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 Do you want to bring some extra love and soothing and maternal nature? Ma. Ma. Do you want to feel the motherly nature, whether it be Mother Nature or feel like being a baby in the arms of the mother? This kind of love and feeling like you are safe. And this is interesting. Sometimes when people attach archetypes to different parts of the body, they'll talk about the heart being the royal, the king or the queen, the governing. And we look at the energies, it is an integrating control area that brings a lot of pieces together. So you might think it is that king or queen archetype. And then you might map, for example, the poet to the throat. You might map I guess like a priest or monk to the crown. These associations to different energies. However, for me personally, and this is why I feel that our integrity and our subjective experience is so important, for me, my heart is more about the inner child. It's about innocence and sincerity. It's the places that I'll weep from when I just want people to be good to each other, when I want simple concepts to be understood. So for me, I would actually attribute more the inner child archetype rather than the king or the queen. And then I might actually attach more the king or the queen to my throat. In the vocalization exercise I was doing, there was pa for the throat and da to articulate, to have that fricative hit, da, when we're really biting in to our language, to the world through our words. So maybe this is more something to do with the king and the queen. Maybe the poet's up here. Maybe the poet is a romance. Maybe it comes to the sacral. Maybe that's merged with our lover. There's so many different ways, and I think that there is a high sentience in the feeling which circumnavigates or supersedes the critical mind trying to understand these things in a very sensible kind of way. Ma. While you're practicing this, you also might want to loop some actions which help that part of the body open up. You might want to do some isolation. So, for example, placing hands on the hips and feeling what happens when you bring the sternum and this part forward, to the side, concave back, to the side, forward. Oh, I feel my spine cracking there, which is great. You might want to roll that around. Sometimes when we are feeling a lot of energy moving, our energy is moving quicker than our mind, but we might want to express. And this reminds me of a language I learned doing commedia dell'arte, Italian mask work, and in particular an artist called Dario Fo. And this is, I guess, gibberish, nonsensical language. Some people also sound like this when they're doing light language. But point being, you're just allowing the articulation through sound, through emotion, rather than always having to make sense. So that the logical thinking mind, the language mind, the vocabulary doesn't catch us up. Because often we want to sound smart or poetic, which is ego, and that gets in the way of the simple creative flow. So you might just want to però come deve si bekela mo scende la bella haste yang kaiting of kata, whatever, it's intention, it's feeling, it's passion, it's purpose. I feel that all of the parts of my body and my breath and everything is going, but I'm not caught up on the specificity of the words. And when you come up here to the face, you could just do face yoga, just doing this daily, articulating different parts. And what an amazing place to create characters from as well. You might want to get a mirror, you might want to just, sometimes isolation, you might want to not move your jaw very much and see what character comes up when you can't really move your jaw. You might start with something, say this. Now, a furrowed brow could be very like, what do you mean? Very intense. What happens if you just change it with a juxtaposition of a big smiling face? So playing with different pieces, it's like, color theory. What happens in the color wheel if you put this color with that color? Do they match? Do they contrast? Is there something exciting that happens in the conflict? So once again, really just exploring. When we were doing the sound lines up before, that sound was very nasally. Sometimes when we're using our voice, we're thinking of it quite literally as well. Here's my vocal cords, my voice box. I'm talking from here, and I'm not really accessing much of the cavity of my sinuses. So of course, the way that all these channels internally go is that we're breathing, we're coming up to the nose, and these pathways also come under the cheekbones into the ears. There's a lot of space that can reverberate and change the sound of our voice and also the nature of our character or persona because of that resonance. So I'm going to come up here. I like this because I feel more of my skull is being used as the resonance instrument. It's kind of funny. It's like, for me, it's more of a British kind of character. It's all very well. I guess we could. Okay, then. This kind of character. But I think energetically as well, I think it's really nice to start to feel these bone structures start to be incorporated in. And it's a clear indication we're starting to not trap or put a ceiling or a jar lid on our communication, but come up towards the crown. I imagine a bit like a whale with the blowhole. And if you do priming, for example, with Tony Robbins, he talks about this being an entry point or maybe an exit point for this connection to the universe. If you look at the archetypes, you might think of it like the priest or the monk in devotion into the greater beyond. So I think this is another key part, is through expression, we are softening, we are surrendering, we are opening. And through that humility, we're actually filled with the power of our potential, inspiration, channeling, looseness. There is a power, not a weakness to softness. I often talk about the yin path to yang. Through the softening across the thresholds, we open up into an increased reservoir of power. So I'll wrap it up there, almost 3/4 of an hour. I hope that was useful. Fair amount of theory, but I would encourage you to play. I'd encourage you to start with something like a vocal warm-up, not wanting to strain anything. You can do these sounds. You could use different words. For me, the words aren't important. It's more about the engagement and attention and activation and support of the voice from different parts of the body. Sa, feeling like roots opening, the root, the base, the anus, the genitals, the bladder coming down. Sa, literally feeling that softening, which is quite a vulnerable space. Ha, to speak from. Re, up here into the womb space. Ga, coming here from the center. Ha, ha, which can support a really nice open throat, powerful gesture. Ma, heart, innocence. Pa, speaking, being heard, executive articulation of vision. Da, that bite of the fricative diction of articulation and having yourself make a mark. Me, strange alien activation of this nasal part coming up to the third eye and beyond. So, ni, da, pa, ma, ga, re, sa. I just felt like going up there on the re for beauty's sake. So yeah, follow beauty. I think there is a function to beauty and flow and harmony. I think it leads us beyond any kind of academic understanding. And if you are feeling flow and intuition, I think you'll be guided through your weirdness into new undiscovered parts of yourself, which were there all along. It's our intuitive bringing of ourselves home and our fulfilling of our personal self-realization, which I think makes us such a great partner in life in whichever context. So just like I started off talking about hoping that your partner can recreate your creations in themselves, when you demonstrate to people you're playing, living, co-creating with, that you have such a wide variety of experiences held within you, I think you're also safer to communicate to, because they entrust. They can give you a secret, they can give you their weirdness, they can give you their aggression or their sincere love, knowing that you have the capacity to receive and recreate and understand them at that. And sometimes someone else just witnessing you in a state is enough to unlock them. And that's really a key part of open world theatre, is allowing people, giving them the privilege of witnessing us in a sincere experience. Not about performance, but the experience. It's a gift. And of course, at the end of the day, the hugest gift is to ourselves. That finally, at the end of days, when we're done, we truly had a life well lived, thoroughly explored, expanded. And I think that is a form of prayer, a form of living prayer, that we know the potential, that we are seeking to expand our senses so we can take more in of reality, what is here, but we just often ignore because we don't have the capacity to see it. And then after having that experience, our artistry and our expression becomes a retelling and an honoring of the huge spectrum and array of life that we have witnessed through our experience. Big love. Stay weird. Bring the innocence of our wilderness back as a common experience to humanity. Thank you so much.